Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Darkhorse Dental Success Podcast. I'm your host, Reuben Camp, the CEO of Darkhorse Tech. And today I'm really excited because I have Trisha Jackson on to talk about operational excellence in dental practices. And you know me, I'm a process guy, so I really wanted to have Trisha on here. We now work in a couple of practices together, and we kind of gravitated towards each other in terms of what we care about and how we want to treat clients. So I just want to welcome her on now.
Hi, Reuben. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this is I know it took a little bit. You're busy, I'm busy to line this up, but I'm happy we had you on. And I always like to hear people's story about how they got sucked into the dental industry. So let's start there. How did you get into this crazy madness?
Yeah, so my stepdad was actually a dentist. And so out of my six siblings, five of us all worked in his practice at some point. I started off as a hygiene assistant and worked as a dental assistant. And my grandma actually was his insurance coordinator. So I eventually made my way to the front desk where I really blossomed and realized that this really checked a lot of boxes for me. I got to interact with people, provide customer service, do a little bit of math. There's always things to figure out, and that keeps me stimulated. And so then from there, I kept pushing, like, what's next, what's next, what's next. So it's kind of very personal dentistry for me because I grew up doing it with my family.
Yeah. No, it's funny because we have a very similar story, and my dad was a general dentist. My uncle taught at UNC Chapel Hill, so I've been surrounded by the weirdos, the dentists, my entire life. And I did done the same thing where, like, I was his dental assistant for emergencies on the weekend. I'd refile charts, I would do steri and hear everyone complain about each other and sterilization. That seems like the place, like, Denise comes back and complains about Candace. I learned the sterilization area, but more importantly, like, we kind of have a sense of what goes on in a dental practice. So when we're speaking with people, like, oh yeah, this gal gets it, which is really important. So can you describe to our listeners just a little bit about, obviously you had a focus, a vision of what you wanted RunDDS to be. Maybe that's different now than it was then, but, like, right now, 2021, what do you want RunDDS to be known for?
Yes. So that kind of also makes me think about why I became a consultant that specifically, and the way that I see my company working is getting in with practices day one, or in some cases, even before day one, to help them answer questions that they're just not sure about. I want to be that engine that gets them going on the right foot. And I realized that that's what my passion was and what I wanted my company to be, from actually cleaning up messes in seemingly successful practices that had been running for 10 or 15 years. And I had the opportunity to work with them. And, I thought I was applying as an insurance coordinator, but then you uncover all of these accounting inaccuracies, or even in some situations, fraudulent billing methods. I've uncovered employee embezzlement. And so my goal is to start working with practices and teach them the ropes. Like, dentists need to understand what their administrative team members and office managers are doing, no matter how much experience they have. It's great to trust them, but be able to follow that, see what's happening. And then just in terms of running the business, growing the business, increasing productivity, and following the numbers, I want dentists to learn how to do that day one, so that after their first year, they have an idea of what success looks like, and how to measure that.
That's awesome. So, we work with a lot of startup practices. So some of this is like, yeah, exactly. It's like, how you sent me a list of bullet points about, the common issues you see when you go dive into someone's software. And we have, accounting messes, billing inaccuracies. They're operating with inefficient recall systems, and they're reporting inaccuracies. So they're not getting good numbers. If you don't have good numbers, as I know, you're not able to successfully know what's going on in your business or make good decisions. And so we'll first start with, I know a lot of startups listen to this podcast. So, why is it so important to get your software set correctly from the beginning? I'll turn it over to you.
There's lots of reasons why that's important. But it all does come back to reporting. So if you don't properly understand the way that your practice management works and reads the data that you're entering into it, your reports are going to be off. And that's when you actually start creating messes. Like a very common one is payment allocation, right? So if you have multiple providers, maybe you start out with just one provider, but down the road, you're going to bring in an associate. You want to understand how when you have that production and you post a payment, it is allocated to that correct provider. The same with adjustments or debits and credits. That's just one example. There's a lot of different examples that maybe we'll jump into. But the importance there is that if you're not putting the data in, right, the correct way that it was meant to be read, the software, or if you use like a third party software, like a Revenue Well or a Weave, they're going to read the data inaccurately, and then that could cause patient communication problems. There's what you're putting in there in your software, it's going to snowball into other problems if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, it goes back to, I'll apply to our business, right? The things I care about are customer satisfaction and how quickly we respond to people. So if I have a client reach out that is unhappy and I go back and I look and my data is not accurate, I don't have a leg to stand on. But if I go, oh, we did email your front desk, she was the one who reached out, and I'm sorry she didn't update you, but here's the update, and that's why there was a delay, right? Some offices have a really hard time with internal communication. We experience this on a daily basis because it's like, you just assume you tell somebody, right? The office manager submitted a ticket, and everything gets magically transferred to the doctor, and usually they just burst out of the operatory. It's like, what happened? What's the, and then they go right to, anyway. That's my problem. So, it's funny, I couldn't help but notice traction behind your shoulder there. How, we're a traction company. We just had our annual meeting, and it's been a really big help. We're like 8 months into it now, and I can't imagine not having those Friday hour-and-a-half meetings now. When do you recommend that a dental office, implement traction into their business? And then, it's really hard to involve every single person, so we just do like the C-suite people at our company. But so when do you recommend that offices implement traction? Then how far down the food chain do you see that?
Yeah, so there are actually consultants out there that are consulting specifically based off of the book traction. Like that's how effective it is. I am not that consultant. I specifically are just there to help you set up, but there's so many good takeaways from the book traction and from their processes and the way that they help you look at the organization of a company, how to implement accountability, how to keep communication flowing and people achieving goals. That's what I love about traction. So although I'm not a consultant that specifically everything I do is based off of traction, it's certainly a mindset, and it's certainly something I fall back on when trying to solve a problem or trying to implement structure into a practice, right? Especially for startups, you really have no structure. So you have to have something to go on. And I think Traction is a book that really helps doctors start processing what they're doing in a organized fashion. It gives them insight into things that they hadn't considered, right? You don't really have problems on day one. You don't really have accountability issues on day one. But if you start those systems before there's a problem, 3 months, 6 months down the road, you're going to have a system to handle and manage that.
Yeah, that's great. I think maybe minimum you start with everyone's responsible for a number, right? And that number is clear and obvious. This is kind of like the supplemental 4 disciplines of execution or 4DX book, where it's like have a clear leaderboard. People know they're in the game. They know what winning is. And that's kind of like, it kind of went on a deep dive of the rocks piece of traction, which I really enjoyed. So when you think about, you're helping them clean up their systems, you're potentially finding embezzlement in these practices, which I'm sure has happened before because it's very common in the industry. I see it from the backup point of view. It's like, hey, we need to restore backup from like 2 years ago because we think our office manager is doing something. But what specifically keeps you up at night in terms of the clients you have and the issues they're going through?
So thankfully, I have set myself some ground rules so that I'm not kept up very often. And this is actually a tip that anyone can use. I learned that it was unfinished projects that would keep me up at night. And I had this habit of checking my email, just like on my phone or whatever. And so I would read something from a client, a great idea. And so I'd start, like, my mind would just start dissecting it. And that would keep me up at night. So I actually have a new rule for myself. I don't check my email if I'm not prepared to take on a new project, because that's the way my mind works. But yeah, so incomplete projects, not having like the next 5 steps of how I'm going to handle something clearly mapped out. If I don't do that, I will be awake all night.
Well, so, kind of going back to the 4DX piece, and it's like you set the goal, or there is an endpoint, right? It's not an open-ended, I'm going to manage this person, right? It's like, I am going to implement this process by this date, at something very specific, or the project will never end, right? It'll just grow into something else. Yeah. So, I think about like how the passion behind what we do, and I think that it's so paired with success, and why people are attracted to certain people. And like, I'm passionate about IT. I've always been passionate about IT, but then you mix in like, I got the dental background, and then I worked at Benco, and I got my, and I really just wanted to be good at this one thing. So how, in terms of how you got got started, got your first clients. So how did helping dentists with operational excellence become your kind of driving force?
Yes. Well, I briefly mentioned that I worked for dentists that were seemingly successful, as I like to say it, because and sometimes they were successful. They had this longevity, right? They're well known in the community for 10, 15 years. And I would get in there and uncover things, make them more profit, right? I would uncover like a 93-page outstanding claims report, right? All sorts of things that they just had no idea about. And so that is what really pushed me towards working with the new clients, right? The new startups, the transitions. And that is just so driving to see somebody brand new, doesn't really understand it, but they're so hungry to learn. They've invested all this money in their practice. They love dentistry. They're trying to build a community. They're trying to build their vision. And here I am with this real life experience that can help them set that up and not have to find these mistakes and this loss of profit over the last 10 years. And it took one person stepping into their practice, 12 years later to say, oh no, like you should have been doing this. That's to me, that's where my passion comes from. I want them to succeed. I want more individual, like I don't want these, DSOs all over the place. Like I want individual practices to succeed.
Yes. No, that's awesome. And so we gave the startup some love, right? Gave them some tips and tricks about what they need to start there. But let's say it's that office you just mentioned. 15 years in the business, doctor's like, yeah, I make a bunch of money, I'm profitable, but it's not really paying attention. Where do you start, right? When he's like, hey, I am ready to bring in, and what are the first 3 things you're looking at when you get into their system?
Yeah. So right away, I'm thinking money, right? We don't want to, the longer we wait to collect on outstanding monies, the less likely we're going to collect on them. And so that's why the outstanding claims report is my very first one, because insurance actually works off of timely filing deadlines. And so if you don't respect those deadlines, and it doesn't matter if the claim got lost in the mail or it just didn't go, sometimes they just don't go through electronically for whatever reason. I don't know what happens at the clearinghouse, but the claim disappears. Insurances don't care about that. So I start by cleaning that up. Then I move on to the aging report, and I assess where are they in terms of having a system to routinely like gather this information and this money from the patients. And one of the things I've noticed frequently in practices is somebody's running the statements, but there's no like consistency as to when they're doing it, right? They're not doing it on a weekly basis. They do it when they have time. And the problem with that is you're not really setting an expectation for the patient. Every once in a while, they'll get a statement from their dental office. So you have to have a clear system. And then we also outline like what follows after, 60 or 90 days past due. And so I'm analyzing that system and helping practices implement that. And then finally, what I would do is obviously look at the way that they're running reports and the accuracy of the reports. So I would start uncovering things like, are payments being allocated to the correct providers? Are credits being allocated to the correct providers and debits? Commonly what you will see is like a family of 5 come into the practice, right? And all of the kids get their cleanings and checkups and everything, but the entire payment gets put on to mom's because she paid for it, right? She swiped the card. And so I work with practices to understand why that's not the best practice and how that can change the way that your reports are actually getting that data, right? That payment all went under one patient, under one provider, and didn't get allocated to every provider that saw that family. I hope that makes sense. That's kind of the first place that I start. And then from there, obviously, we're building on production, patient flow, the patient experience, and all of that. But I always start with the money.
It's good. That's probably what people care about the most anyway.
Yeah.
So have you ever gone into a dental practice and be like, wow, you guys are just like, you're nailing it. You don't need me. Or does everyone need help in some regard?
I believe that everyone needs a check-in, right? If you think about the maintenance on your car, right? You can have a great car, but you do have to routinely take it in for maintenance. Have somebody who is experienced just check it out and see what's going on. How can you make your car more efficient and effective for you and increase the longevity, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm certainly not the consultant for every practice at every stage of their career, but there is a consultant out there for every practice at every stage of their career. And so I believe that dentists should invest in their teams, invest in their practice. And sometimes that means taking everybody to specific CEs, but sometimes it means having a practice management company come in and assess things, having somebody come in to negotiate your fees if you're credentialed with insurance. And sometimes that means bringing in a consultant to work with and figure out new ways to grow the practice.
Yeah. And that's something like I'm on the business side of things. This is my first and only business I've ever ran. I've done it since I was 25. So I'm humble as humble pie in terms of, hey, this is the way it works for me. And I brought in consultants and professionals, and I've done peer groups just because I'm always on that search for the best way to do something. Am I doing it the best way? What is my competition doing? Like trying to be aware. And what that kind of flows into one of my final questions here is, how do you define your ideal client? So, I'd probably, if I was a dentist, be an ideal client because I'm really open to information, criticism, all that stuff. I don't take it super personally. I'm just like, what do I need to do? What am I not doing? But you could describe like, what are you looking for in terms of a personality that you can work with?
Yeah, well, specifically personality, just someone who is interested in truly running their practice, right? Somebody who's not just looking for their employees to do everything, because their employees will do a lot of the work, but it really does require the owner to step in and provide oversight on what's being done and learn the basics so that you can run a report and question something, right? So you can see that things maybe aren't adding up or certain adjustments are being taken that shouldn't be. So my ideal client is obviously a startup practice or a practice looking at going through an ownership transition. But personality wise, I just ask that my clients be open to learning and to doing a little bit of hard work, because owning a practice is very tough sometimes. But if you put the strategy and the organization into it, it'll be a lot easier.
That's really good. And is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Oh, gosh, we did cover quite a bit. I mean, I for startups specifically, when you get that practice management software, I don't know if this is really a question, but just a statement. When you get that software, don't just pay attention to the clinical side of things. Really learn how the administrative team will be using the software, and understand that. So when they have questions, you can help answer them, or you can at least see why the numbers aren't adding up. And I would say that that's something that maybe people don't spend enough time understanding, is the way that the ledgers and the reports work.
Yeah, the back end stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's something I've had to, I know how everything works here because I've had to learn it and build. I've done every single job at our company, but there at a certain point, I'm going to be busy enough where I'm going to delegate that to a manager. I swear. That's my goal anyway. But well, Trisha, thank you so much for your schedule is ridiculous. So making time for us and the listeners here is awesome. And if anyone is interested in reaching out to you and saying, or just being like, hey, can you just peek under and peek under the rug and let me know if there's something amiss here? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me by email. It's just Trisha, Trisha, at RunDDS.com. I love chatting with dentists. So I am here to help and be of assistance and service to you. So even if we are not going to have a working relationship right away, if you have a question, shoot it my way. I'm happy to answer. I also have a podcast and a YouTube channel. It's Run Your Practice. So you can check that out as well.
It's awesome. And if you ever want to part with the name RunDDS, let me know. I'll probably buy it from you. Super jealous of that name. It's a fantastic name. But again, Trisha, thank you so much for coming on. You were great and provide a lot of value to our listeners here.
Thank you, Reuben.